The future never arrives as the future, it arrives as the now. In other words, right now, as I'm speaking here, this is what I considered the future, say, a day ago, okay? But now it just feels as the now. In other words, is no different than yesterday, in essence. Hey guys, so I'm back today. It's day number 3 here in San Marcos, La Laguna, which is a town in Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And for the past few days, I've been doing some commentary on The Power of Now by Eckart, which is a fantastic book that talks about some fairly fundamental um, spiritual topics. The first one that I touched upon was the topic of identification with mind. Hello. And the second topic was around the egoic mind, right? And those two are highly connected. So once again, identification with mind was all about this idea that your mind tends to identify who you are with either the things that you own, uh, things that you do, such as your career or sports, talents that you have, but also ideas that you have or emotions that you're experiencing. And it attaches a sense of self to them and it doesn't let go of them. And that not letting go of them, that resistance is the egoic mind. So the egoic mind will then be this entity that starts to form and is constantly resisting the present moment as it is. So it resists reality, and that resistance creates a lot of tension and creates essentially a lot of bad mojo around you, right? It doesn't let you go with the flow of life, but you are constantly in resistance and you are um, constricted both emotionally but also in your body. So a lot of the time when you are in resistance, you'll start to become sick. You start to generate a lot of tension in your muscles, which doesn't let the blood flow through in a cool way. But you also start to um, generate a lot of adrenaline and cortisol and hormones that are very helpful in the short term when you need a burst of energy and action, but very harmful to your health in the long run. Okay. Now, as you can see by the book, so it's called The Power of Now, and it's all about how the now, the present moment, is the most powerful uh, thing there is. That's you're supposed to live in the now, and a lot of people have trouble grasping that concept, especially because Eckhart Tolle goes into saying that time doesn't really exist. He says that all that ever exists is the now, and that's a very can be a very confusing statement. So I thought today I'd have it go at the topic of time, as discussed in the book. I feel very ill-equipped discussing the topic of time, especially because we get into all these very difficult discussions around physics, space-time, and those kind of things. But really, what the book is discussing is what Eckhart Tolle calls psychological time. Okay, and so in order to kind of do an introduction of what he means by it, I thought I'd just read a bit of a passage and then start commenting on it. And that'll give you an idea of where the guy is coming from when it comes to the topic of time. So, so Eckhart says that you will not have any doubt that psychological time is a mental disease if you look at its collective manifestations. Um, okay, so he's talking again about psychological time. He's not talking about physics time, but time in your head. Okay, and he's saying that the present moment is all that you ever have, and that there is never a time when your life is not in this moment. Okay, now, so this is the central point of the book. It is essentially saying, look, your mind is a machine, and it has great abilities beyond what any animal can do. It can essentially allow you to travel into the past, into your memories, and start thinking about things that have happened in the past, which either made you happy and therefore you miss them, or which you shouldn't have done and therefore you regret, right? So um, your mind has the ability to drag you into the past. And it also has the ability to project you into the future, so you can plan ahead, essentially. Now that planning ahead goes way beyond what any animal can do in the natural kingdom. So if you take, say, a squirrel. I don't know if you've seen those squirrels. They start to fill their cheeks with sort of, I don't know, hazelnuts or something of that kind, and that's because the squirrel is planning for the winter, let's say. But if you think about it, the squirrel might not even have a clue that the winter is coming. It's just operating purely by instinct, and that's just what a squirrel does. It fills his cheeks, and the winter comes, and the squirrel survives. Now, the human mind, it's amazing. It can project you into all kinds of different versions of the future, and then you can start to work towards them or plan ahead or um, take action so that you prevent certain outcomes from taking place. However, what tends to happen with both projection into the past and projection into the future is that your mind is constantly dragging you between those two. Okay? And so, depending on your degree of presence and mindfulness, you will, if your degree of mindfulness is very low, chances are you're constantly living either in the past or the future. And so you're caught between missing things that already are gone, regretting things that you shouldn't have done, worrying about things in the future, or something that is also not uncommon, thinking that the future is what's going to bring you happiness. That there's something in the future that you're missing right now, which is going to be the one thing that delivers on your expectations. And then once that thing happens, then suddenly your life will be what you want it to be. Now, uh, if you've been paying close attention, that promise never really pans out. So it just never delivers because of something very important, which is stated here in The Power of Now, and that is that the future never arrives as the future, it arrives as the now. In other words, right now, as I'm speaking here, this is what I considered the future, say, a day ago, okay? But now it just feels as the now. In other words, is no different than yesterday, in essence, okay? Um, so maybe it's good to start by then going into exploration of the past because, well, that's what came before. So if we go time-wise, then going into the past might be a way to start exploring this topic a little bit further. So, what Eckart Tolle is explaining in his book is that we carry within us a huge amount of past, okay? And that past could be down to personal experiences, maybe even experiences of our parents, and they passed it on to us in the way that they view the world, and maybe even experiences of our society. I mean, as we grow up absorbing what is the social norms, and those social norms come from collective experiences, and they're passed on to us, and they become part of our psyche, and they become part of the way we view things. So that when you are reacting to a certain situation, you are reacting in the context of the beliefs and the norms that the society in which you grew up reacts to those situations. There's some mild examples of that. There's other more extreme examples. If you take, say, how we view polygamy in our society, we think that is just not very kosher, right? We stay away from it because we think that a single man and a single woman form what we call the nuclear family, and so whenever we see polygamy, there's an instinctual gut reaction that makes us reject it, and then we have these ideas that then rationalize that reaction. However, there are societies, and they still exist today, where certain Aborigines operate in a completely different way, in which one woman will have several male partners, and they all fulfill different roles as they interact with her, but she doesn't have a single husband. And also in the past, it's well known that maybe the stronger hunters would have several female partners, and so your reaction to a certain situation like monogamy is highly dictated by the rules and the beliefs of the society you were born in. Okay, now the same goes for certain experiences that you may have had in the past. So, if, for example, you find yourself being afraid to speak in public today, and you start tracing back, you will notice that there might have been an experience in the past where you might have been made fun of, or somebody who was, fairly unconscious in their own right, made fun of you, or put you down, or dismissed you, or maybe just ignored you, and that was imprinted in your mind, and it was a painful experience. And what you took from that is you took that experience as you generalized it, in a way where your mind now says speaking in public is a painful situation, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Okay, so you carry that past with you. Now, what does that do to your present is what is interesting, because see, unless that mind pattern has become a part of your awareness, unless you are very aware of how you are reacting and why you are reacting to certain situations, chances are you're just repeating them over and over again. In other words, nothing new is coming in, which is why every day feels exactly like the one before. Okay, you are waiting for that event to turn your life around, but in essence, there's no space for that event to come in, or that new pattern to take place in your life, because you are essentially asleep, and you are just blindly repeating old patterns that you acquired in the past. Okay, so there's a very strong phrase in the book that says, die to your past at every moment because you don't need it. Okay, so really the living in the now, the power of now, is when you become aware of your present situation as it is in this very moment. In other words, the lights, the sounds around you, the presence of other people who are right here around you, the way your body feels, the way your emotions feel, and the ideas in your head, you're observing them, you're observing your memories. And the moment you become present to them and you become present to the now, the past stops having an influence on you because you've become aware of it. Now, it could be that for some time you are aware of old patterns that you were mindlessly repeating, and you still don't have the mind power to stop repeating them, but the process has begun, and that's the most important part. So, an old, undesirable pattern can only survive so long, while you are becoming present of it. So, the moment you're fully present to it, you start really observing it for what it is. It's likely that that old pattern is going to start dissolving, because your mind power is just becoming stronger and stronger. And there will come a point where you are able to observe yourself going into an automatic repetition of a certain past pattern, and you will be able to stop yourself and literally deviate and do something else. So, I mean, I saw it for myself. I think I can only claim to have acquired that amount of mind power this year, where, for example, I was trying to cut down on dairy, or rather eliminate it completely from my diet. And the the pattern that I was trying to fight was I would be getting up early in the morning, going to the train station, and just grabbing one of these nice fruity yogurt shakes, like a nutritious yogurt shake. Okay, and I would grab one of those before I jump on the train, and then I jump on the train and go to work. And what I had noticed in the past was that I was suffering from just a lot of mucus and a lot of sort of phlegm. And as I started to read around it, it turns out that dairy does this to you. So I thought, okay, I need to cut down on dairy. But I found myself still going and grabbing that yogurt every morning, okay? But I had become now aware of the pattern. And it wasn't long until a day came where I was walking towards the yogurt aisle, and I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to literally take two steps to the right, and instead of going to the yogurt aisle, I'm just going to grab this green apple that is next to me. And I grabbed the green apple instead. So that was change happening in real time while I was aware of it. It was incredibly powerful. And so ever since, I started just to grab the green apple over and over again, and I started to reinforce the pattern that I wanted to create. And so the moment that happened, I became aware that I was not bound to my existing patterns and to my past anymore in that small example. Now, there's bigger examples of, let's say, stronger trauma that you want to defeat, or bigger change that you want to create in your life. But you start with these small things, and then you start to build a mental power to do it. Okay, so that's when it comes to past patterns and how you can die to the past. Now, it's not only with regards to actions that you take, it can only be also around feelings or emotions that pop up when certain things take place. So, say that you're at work and somebody criticizes a paper you wrote, and then you feel threatened, and you immediately start to defend yourself. Now, the reason you start to defend yourself is because your ego has been threatened. You may have an image of yourself as somebody who's great at what they do, and the moment you receive that criticism, it hurts, right? So your self feels attacked, and then you go on reaction mode. So that's it's a pattern in your brain that comes from the past, right? It comes from some kind of trauma or thing to prove that you acquired. You have some kind of chip on your shoulder, and you just keep playing that reaction out. And as long as you play out that reaction, it puts you kind of like, it puts you in an awkward situation towards whoever's giving you constructive feedback. And it also prevents you from learning and becoming better at what you do. So what you want to do is you want to eliminate that part of your past. And so essentially any pattern and any reaction that you carry from the past that generates negativity within you is something that you want to try and work your way through. Okay. And so that's, let's say, a couple of examples of how the past can affect your present moment. Now, your mind is going to be dragging you to the past constantly, right? It's going to be saying, oh, don't do that because, or do you remember the day when things were better? Or I wish I hadn't done this and that because, it hurt somebody, or it caused me pain, or, I lost a bunch of money because of this mistake that I made. And the reason your mind does that is because on some level, it thinks that by going back over and over again, it can somehow solve it, okay? And we both know that that's just not the case. Things in the past are done. There's zero value in dwelling on them. I used to have another thing happen to me, which was whenever I came to Guatemala, as I flew back out to Amsterdam, I would say goodbye to my parents, which is always a painful moment that I wish I could just avoid altogether. But it always happens, right? I always have to say goodbye to them at some point, and my dad gets pretty upset every time. And whenever I went into the airport and past security, I would sort of, my head was hanging low, and I was feeling down, and I would make myself feel down all the way back to Amsterdam, right? And then one day I thought to myself, well, hang on a second, like, who exactly am I helping with this? This is myself just trying to preserve some kind of image of myself as a good son who feels bad, right? And do my parents feel better because of it? No. I just make myself miserable. Nothing's changing. I'm gonna go back to Amsterdam anyway. And so one day I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna drop this actually. I'm going to go into past security. I'm gonna go into say duty free, and maybe I'm not gonna do a lot of shopping and stuff, but I'm just gonna look around, maybe get a bottle or two for my friends back home, and I'm gonna feel happy for having visited my parents, and whatever time we spent together, I'm gonna be grateful for. And that entirely changed my feeling around the departure. And I noticed that maybe even I can be a better son by doing that, because it makes me appreciate my time with them much more. It makes me want to call them more often in a positive way, right? And just bring good stuff to our interactions and to my interactions with all the people around me, as opposed to being this sort of, kind of this downer of a person who just goes around being like, oh, I'm supposed to feel bad, and that's what makes me a good person. It's a very destructive belief. And so the saying goodbye to my parents is in the past. There's nothing to do about it. There's no reason to carry that bag of bricks around with me. So I put it down, I drop it, and guess what? Nothing happened. My energy started to go up. I felt better about it, and I've become a better son as a result, okay? And that's an example of how the past, even in small instances, can keep a grip on you, and it's a grip that you want to release as soon as you possibly can.